So, something's been cooking in the intelligence arena. The ongoing geopolitical dynamics between India, Canada, and the United States regarding allegations of extraterritorial killings of Niger and the alleged attempt at Pannu have revealed several interesting perspectives. Some argue that India lacks the ability to discreetly eliminate its state enemies, drawing comparisons to Israel and Mossad's seemingly flawless operations. And there are others that reject the notion outright, claiming that India does not engage in extraterritorial assassinations. Another narrative states that Western powers are using these accusations to destabilize India's rise as a non white, non Anglospheric global power. Now, according to this view, a very popular one too, despite strategic, political, technological, and economic convergences with the West, Western agencies are perpetually conspiring against India. A focal point of this theory is the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, a current favorite of the Indian commentariat. I'm sure you must have heard of the Five Eyes more times than you can remember in the last few days alone. So, the Five Eyes, which includes the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, is a well established intelligence sharing network among these English speaking countries. Since Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's accusations against India rely on intelligence rather than hard evidence, many speculate that the knowledge came from the Five Eyes. The clandestine nature of Five Eyes operations makes it a fertile ground for geopolitical intrigue. Now, remember that intelligence as a tool of statecraft enables countries to monitor one another in a global system that is fundamentally anarchic. If there is a mystery in state affairs, it lies in the covert operations of intelligence agencies. It is alleged that Five Eyes countries even spy on each other, circumventing domestic laws by collecting intelligence on fellow members and then sharing the gathered information to bypass legal restrictions on domestic surveillance. Interesting. Despite the inclusion of additional countries like Denmark, Norway, West Germany, and France in intelligence collaborations after the Second World War, this alliance retains the name Five Eyes due to the original signatories of the UK-USA Treaty. So, how has the goalpost of international espionage evolved since the Cold War times? See, the theory that the Five Eyes is determined to destabilize India's rise is quite intriguing. In the current controversy with Canada, this assumption stems from statements by other Five Eyes members urging India to cooperate with Canada. However, India has navigated similar accusations from the US rather well, specifically concerning an alleged assassination attempt on Sikh separatist Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. India and the US have worked together on this issue, with the latter reportedly satisfied with the level of cooperation. In fact, an important Predator drone deal with the US was signed on the very day the Canada controversy took off again. By contrast, Trudeau's undiplomatic and graceless handling of the allegations led to a proportionate snub from India. So, diplomatic pragmatism appears to be working too. India's National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, repeatedly met his Canadian counterpart in Singapore. India has now placed the ball in Canada's court, asking for progress on long-standing extradition requests that have been ignored blatantly by Ottawa. Many in India believe it is time to focus on a post-Trudeau Canada, dismissing his actions as driven by domestic politics and double standards. And it is true that Canadians themselves dislike Trudeau the most. Additionally, India maintains deep and multidimensional relationships with three of the Five Eyes members at least: the US, the UK, and Australia. Political disagreements such as the ongoing Khalistan issue with the UK has not fundamentally altered these strategic ties that have evolved, chasing convergences through a 2+2 mechanism and other strategic partnerships. Nonetheless, the Indian commentariat remains rather fixated on the idea that the Five Eyes are working to destabilize India's rise. Now, this notion is peculiar, especially in the light of declassified proceedings from the Donald Trump era that almost no one ever mentions. The House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, led by Adam Schiff, underscored that for the US pivot to Indo-Pacific to succeed, intelligence cooperation of Five Eyes with Japan, India, and South Korea must be expanded. While, of course, full membership in the Five Eyes was never considered ideal, a plus format engagement was recommended by analysts. Even I have written on that for a Rutledge publication. It is referenced in my piece as well. You can take a look. During the Cold War, the primary focus of the Five Eyes was gathering intelligence on the Soviet Union. Now, as US strategic interests have shifted to the Indo-Pacific, China has become the new focal point of the alliance's operations. In this context, there should be a logical convergence of interests between India and the Five Eyes countries on China's activities that directly impact India on the line of actual control and in the subcontinent at large. So, why do we have so much Cold War baggage? In my opinion, two key historical factors have contributed to ingrained anti-West sentiment in India's strategic mindset. First, of course, the era of colonial exploitation, and second, the 1971 Treaty of Friendship with Soviet Union. The same year, India asserted dominance in South Asia by liberating Bangladesh from Pakistan. Yet an interesting contradiction lies in the fact that during the 1962 India-China War, Delhi refused Washington's assistance while the Soviet Union did not extend a helping hand against CCP. India suffered a crushing defeat and territorial loss, resulting in the establishment of the disputed LAC with China, which remains a hotbed of tensions today and where disengagement has finally started to happen. Now, despite various efforts to manage the LAC in a consistent manner, India has faced China's unilateral attempts to alter the status quo. In retrospect, it remains unclear if the 1971 victory compensates for the 1962 defeat. India now faces weaker yet troublesome neighbor to the west, Pakistan, backed by a more powerful and aggressive eastern adversary with hostile intentions, that is China. Nonetheless, memories of victory tend to overshadow those of defeat, and India's strategic mindset became focused on the Soviet Union and later Russia as its historical allies, and for understandable reasons. Cold War divisions shaped the global order for the next 3 decades until the 9/11 attacks shifted the US foreign policy and China's asymmetric rise pushed momentum in India-US strategic ties. But do you know some interesting bits about India and the Soviet spying? Today we talk about the Five Eyes so much, but back in the Cold War, regarding intelligence infiltration into India, the deepest penetration was unarguably by the Soviet Union itself. During the Cold War, the Soviets relied on two key intelligence gathering methods: secret informants and undercover agents, referred to as razvedka in Russian. According to declassified CIA archives, Western intelligence emphasized more on research-based intelligence, while the Soviets placed more value on undercover operations. This is the way they differed in their style. One of the most fascinating accounts of Soviet intelligence activities in India comes from the Mitrokhin archive. Compiled by KGB officer Vasily Mitrokhin, these files first published in parts in 1999 and then featured in a 2005 book caused political controversy in India. They revealed that India had the largest number of KGB agents outside the USSR, with deep Soviet influence in Congress-ruled India. The USSR believed that it could win the Cold War by using proxy influence in the non-aligned movement, utilizing methods like political interference, illicit funding, and secret gifts, not only to Mrs. Gandhi, but also to the Communist Party affiliates. Mitrokhin's revelations were later supported by memoirs from other KGB officers and quite high-ranking, such as Lieutenant General Leonid Sherbarshin, who specialized in South Asia and led the KGB's foreign intelligence in 1989. Sherbarshin described how India's academia was easily influenced by Marxist-Leninist ideology, and he actually mocked them as soft targets for Soviet propaganda. Then, former Intelligence Bureau Director Malloy Krishna Dhar's 2005 book, Open Secrets, further documented how numerous Indian ministers and MPs were on the KGB payroll. By the way, he also mentioned that CIA had many ministers on its payroll as well. Actually, both sides competed for influence. Dhar highlighted in later interviews how the Defense Ministry and military procurement departments were penetrated by the KGB. India's long-standing reliance on Russian military equipment supports these claims, reinforcing the deep connections between India and the Soviet Union during the Cold War years. Since then, geopolitics has transformed a lot, of course. One of the key legacies of the Modi-Rajnath Singh era is India's efforts to diversify its defense partnerships and reduce dependencies on a single source such as Russia. The government has opened India's defence sector to foreign direct investment and encouraged private sector involvement. Although these changes will take time to bear fruit, they are expected to significantly reshape India's defence ecosystem in line with the ideal of self-reliance or Atmanirbharta. Today, India maintains a multi-aligned foreign policy with continued engagement with Russia. As you know, our Prime Minister has just embarked on a trip to Kazan to participate in the BRICS summit at Russia. At the same time, India's most critical strategic partnerships are with countries like the US, France, and Israel. In conclusion, anti-Westernism, a legacy of India's colonial past and Cold War era alliances, was once a dominant response in Indian strategic thinking. However, as global alignments evolve, it is crucial for India's strategic reasoning to align with the new realities of international statecraft, stop looking for validation from others, particularly in relation to the challenges posed by China and its network of allies. India has come a long way in asserting its influence on the world stage. I will be back to discuss this trend amid its many dimensions, largely strategic ones. Stay tuned.